Hi, thanks for joining us for today's webinar on effective legal research. My name's Penny Sullivan. I'm one of the Sector Sustainability Coordinators at Community Legal Centres Queensland. First, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're holding today's webinar. In Meanjin or Brisbane, they are the Turrbal and the Yagara people. We pay deepest respect to elders past, present and emerging. As this webinar is being viewed by people across Queensland and around Australia, we also pay respect to the traditional owners throughout the country. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of the lands in Australia and their continuing connection to land, water and culture. We acknowledge the stories, traditions and living cultures of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and commit to fostering a culture of learning from and working with First Nations peoples in the spirit of reconciliation and access to justice. We extend a warm welcome to any First Nations peoples joining us today. So I'm very pleased to now welcome Susie Cullerton from Minter Ellison to present today's webinar. Susie's going to look at the most effective free online resources available for efficient legal research, and will cover a range of aspects around efficient search strategies, setting up relevant monitoring alerts and options for sourcing free online commentary. I'll let Susie share a bit more about herself when I hand over in a moment. Before I do that though, as always, just some quick housekeeping. Today's webinar is being recorded, and later today or tomorrow I'll send the link for that recording, and I'll also attach a copy of the PowerPoint slides which I distributed this morning. The PowerPoint's also available in the handout section of the control panel if you wanted to access it. We do encourage you to ask questions. Please type your question into the question box on the control panel and we'll read your question out. We will hold questions until the end of the presentation, but do feel free to type them in as you think of them. So that's it from me for now. I'm going to hand over to Susie and I'll talk to you again at the end of the session. Welcome, Susie.
Thanks very much, Penny. And thanks everyone for coming along today to listen to this presentation. So as Penny said, my name's Susie. I'm one of the legal researchers at Minter Ellison. I've been working in law firm libraries doing legal research in Australia and the UK for about 18 years now. So I've been doing it for a little while. And in my job, we use sort of a mixture of subscription-based databases and paid and free ones. But the focus of my session today is how to get the most out of the free legal research databases that are available to all of us. So I'm going to look at legislation, case law, commentary and alerts, and I've also got a little bit at the end where we'll look at finding some obscure historical material. Now, I thought I'd start with a quick poll just to get an idea of the sorts of problems that you're all up against when it comes to conducting legal research. So Penny, if you wouldn't mind starting the poll.
Sure, will do. Just getting that going for you now. So we'll launch that poll. There we go. Everyone should be able to see that now. So we'll give a few minutes for people to respond.
And you can select more than one if you want.
Yes, we made it so people could choose any that might apply. So we've got about getting good numbers of votes in now. So we're just a few more, about 10 more seconds and we'll close that off. Okay, great. All right.
All right, thank you.
Results of that, the results should be up there now.
Okay, so the top one is unsure if you've looked in the right places. And then the next two are pretty close together, so people get too many irrelevant results. So that's something that we can definitely look at today, refining the results. And a lack of access to subscription databases. Unfortunately, I can't help with that one, but it's good to know. But hopefully, you know, after we have a look at, you know, some of the things that you can do in the free databases, that might alleviate that problem a bit. 46% of you said structuring the search string. That can, be a little bit of a challenge. So we'll be looking at that too. And then only 20% have issues with too few or no results. I think that's quite common, that the main problem there would be too many results rather than too few. We have so much information out there now, it's quite an art to refine it down. So I think we'll now run through some example legal research questions. and go through the different databases that are available to us. As Penny mentioned, just pop any questions you have in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. Now, our library team at Minters has put together a list of legal research resources on our website, and I'll just jump in there now. No, I do not want to go there.
Susie, I just want to make sure that we can see your screen again. So could you just go back up to just show your screen and make sure that your screen is being shared, because we're just stuck on the poll at the moment.
Oh, is it? Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, so I've got your Minter Ellison website up there.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, great.
All right. So the research databases, or most of them that I'll be talking about today, they're under, if you come to the Minters website, under the thinking menu and then down to legal resources for research. So we've divided them under these different headings here. And I just wanted to start with legislation. Now, I've got a couple of examples there, Queensland and Commonwealth, to look at today, but regardless of which jurisdiction you are working in or looking at, I would highly recommend LawLex as a great starting point for legislative research. LawLex is a database provided by SAI Global, and there is a paid version of it, the premium version, but there's also a free version. You do need to register to access the free version, but it's quick and easy. Now, I'm logged in up here at the moment, but I think once you start typing in, it'll prompt you to register, and it's very quick and easy. Now, one of the main benefits of using LawLex when searching for an act or a reg is that it's always pointing you to the latest online consolidation, which is a little bit more reliable than Googling. Now, I know we probably all Google for legislation, and that's, you know, it does return, generally speaking, it will return the government legislation website as the top hit. But what I've noticed, especially with Commonwealth legislation, is when you click through to that link in Google, it often takes you to a superseded version. And unless you're sort of looking out for that, you might not be aware that you're looking at out-of-date legislation. So this is just a more reliable sort of way of ensuring that you're looking at the current legislation. It's got a few other benefits as well. It links straight to extrinsic material, historical versions, and you've got an option over here to browse legislation by subject. So the example I've got is, if we're looking for the Family Law Act, I'll just start typing that in and it will bring up some suggestions. I'll jump into the Family Law Act 1975. So LawLex tells us up the top here that it's current. Oh, I'll just point out here, this stuff on the right-hand side, you can ignore that because that's the premium stuff that's locked down. But all of this on the left-hand side is free. So it's telling us it's current legislation, it's a principal act. This is the only real issue with LawLex. It has this currency statement here about when it was last updated. It's almost always wrong. I don't know why. When you click into this link, which takes you through to the Federal Register, you will see that the legislation was compiled on the 18th of October 2023, and you're accessing the latest version. If we switch back to LawLex, yeah, there are a few years out there, so just don't worry too much about that. And then down here is where it files each piece of legislation under different subject areas. So you could jump into one of these subject areas and see similar legislation. It's sort of more useful for state-based legislation if you're looking at comparative acts and regs around the different states and territories. And then depending on the age of the act, you'll get a number of links down here. Now, because the Family Law Act is quite old, you've only got the link to historical versions, which again takes you into the Federal Register, but it gives you this page here of all the different versions of the legislation. Just one thing to mention here with the versions, say you're looking at, you want a version of the Family Law Act as it was on a particular date, say in September 2020. So you would not be looking at this registered date column here. That's just a formality of when it was registered. You actually need to look at the start date, end date, and find when your September 2020 would fall, which would be in this one here. So you'd be looking at compilation number 89. That would be the version that you'd want there. All right. Because, yeah, as I was saying, this is an older act. We've only got historical versions. In the next example I'll show you, it's got a few more extra links there that can be quite useful. But if we stick with the Family Law Act, let's say we are looking at section 67Z, and that covers the notification of child abuse or family violence. And say you're interested in finding out a bit more about the history of this section. So I'm going to jump into the latest version of this act. And it's in 2 volumes. So I want to jump right down to the end of the 2nd volume. We just scroll all the way down. Okay, so here we are at the end notes. I'm going to jump up a little bit. So it was section 67Z. Sorry for the quick scrolling here. Z was added by number 167 of 1995, and then it's got all of these amendments as well. So say you wanted to see what act is number 167 of 1995, we could jump back to LawLex, and we'll go back to the search page. And instead of running a search there, you can jump into the filters, and I just want Commonwealth. And it was 1995, I think. And we want document 167. And make sure you do include repealed or failed legislation here, because often the amending act, once they've made the amendment, will get repealed. So we're just looking for Commonwealth legislation that matches the year 1995 and number 167. And so it's brought up a regulation regarding honeybees, but this is the one that we're after, the Family Law Reform Act 1995-167. You can jump into that one and then see the full text, see how it amended the act. And you've got the second reading for this one. So this is slightly newer, 1995. Some of the newer acts would also have EMs as well, not this particular one. So you do get a mixed bag with LawLex, depending on the age of the legislation. Another thing I wanted to point out with the Federal Register, if you're wanting to check the currency, just to make sure that the version that you're looking at here, this in-force latest version, has all of the amendments consolidated, like, you know, if there were amendments made in the past few days, for example, you could jump to the series page. And so it would be listed here. So you can see here it's got this amendments that never commenced. You don't really have to worry about those. But the other day there was some listed here. Unfortunately, they're not here anymore. I think I got a snapshot of it in the PowerPoint slide that would have been sent to you. But it will say amendments not yet consolidated. So that's a little flag to alert you to the fact that you may need to read the Principal Act in conjunction with the amending act. All right, so coming back to, I'll close down these federal examples, coming back to the LawLex search page, I'm now going to have a look for, right back to the beginning, have a look for some Queensland legislation. So the example I've got here is the state penalties, and I'll just wait for that to load. Oh no, state penalties enforcement. All right, so again, it's current Principal Act, and again, this date is wrong. It's been updated more recently than that. So this time, this legislation link is going to take you to the Office of Queensland Parliamentary Council. You've got your subject of interest there, and then now here is a better example. You've got a link to the EM, the historical versions, and the second reading speech. So Queensland legislation, and I'm sure each state and territory has its own differences here, is again different to the federal legislation in terms of its commencement details and that sort of thing. I mean, often, yes, you'll find the commencement details under Section 2 of the Act, and often it will say this date commences on a day to be fixed by proclamation. So in the Commonwealth Act that we were just in, you could again go down to the end notes and it will tell you what that proclamation date was for commencement. In Queensland, and I think this is similar in a few other jurisdictions as well, you can come up to legislative history, and it's got the date of assent down here, but under history notes, or legislation, here we go. It's got the commencement date on assent, and the remaining provisions were the 27th of November 2000. So Queensland is a little bit different to Commonwealth legislation. If we go back to view the whole Act, in that it's got amendments to each section listed under or within the text of the Act itself. You can see here for Section 5, the amendments listed there. However, these only appear if you've got your history notes turned on at the top. So if I turn those off now, that disappears. So just make sure you keep your history notes turned on if you do need that sort of information. And then also keep in mind that legislative history for commencement details. Another thing that the Queensland legislation website does, and this is a fairly recent thing, but I think, yeah, they must be back to around 2014 now, but it's got these comparative versions. So when you get this little icon here in between two versions, it means, or not that icon, the little arrows next to it. It means that you can compare this version with that version of the Act, or this one with that. You can't compare 2014 with 2023. It's just the acts that are right next to each other. So if I click on this most recent one here, it will open up a document, and it defaults to underlining the track changes. I personally prefer to show it as shaded, and then you can, I'll just scroll down here. Oh, this must be a bad example. They must be really minor. Let me find a better one. I think this first one had some significant changes. Oh, no, sorry, let me go back. Again, I'm just going to change it to the highlighted changes, and you can see in the menu here, you've got the green and the red, and as you scroll down, it tells you what's been added and what was taken away. All right, so I'm going to move on to case law now. So coming back to the Minters page here, just minimize that. And under case law, we've got a few different databases here, broken up by jurisdiction, and then the two main ones up the top, Ostley and Jade. I'm going to focus on Ostley today, but I will show you a little bit of Jade as well. So Ostley is an excellent database for case law. And I mean, we have access to Lexis and Westlaw here, but Ostley certainly holds its own with those two databases. You know, you can't do the same level of advanced searching to refine the results that you can in Westlaw and Lexis, but in terms of coverage, it's got a far superior coverage of the lower courts and tribunals than the paid databases. And there are ways around the lack of advanced search options, which hopefully I'll be able to show you a few tips there today. One thing we do say about OSLI is just to be careful about using it for legislation. It can be very out of date, several consolidations out of date for legislation. Having said that, it is great for drilling down to a section of an act and seeing what cases have referred to that section, or also commentary on that section. But I wouldn't use it as like a primary source of legislation. So going back to the Family Law Act, I'm going to have a look for cases that consider Section 72, and that covers spousal maintenance. So you can search up here for a piece of legislation, but when I'm looking for cases that consider a section, I personally prefer to browse to it. So I would pick the relevant jurisdiction here, so Commonwealth, and then I'm coming into Commonwealth legislation because I'm interested in the Family Law Act. And just make sure you jump into Consolidated Acts, not Numbered Acts. You want the latest version that OSLI has, so that you get the most comprehensive list of cases there. Now, the Family Law Act is one of the most accessed acts on OSLI, so it does appear in your list here. But if you're after something that is not in this list, it will just be listed up here alphabetically. So we'll jump into F, and there it is there. So I'm after 72. So I'll click into the section number. And then we've got the text of the section over here, and down on the right-hand side, you've got this cited by, and then a link through to note up references. So this is an automatically generated feature of OSLI. You click into that, and it tells you, it gives you a list of all of the documents, whether they're cases, commentary, journals, legislation, that refer to this particular section. So you can see up the top here, it's got over 1,000 documents, which is way too many to work with. And it does that by creating this little search string up here. Fortunately, we can then refine these results further. So let's say of these cases, I only want ones that, let's say I've put in here, you can see my searches there. I'll just do and disability to start with. So this is going to narrow it down just by those results that include the word disability. So that's brought it down significantly to 192. You can add further terms to keep narrowing that down if you need to. Otherwise, another way of narrowing further is, because you can see the first few results are a law reform commission report. So if you're only after cases, you can get rid of all that stuff by jumping into sorting by database. And then you can see here the different results here. All the courts listed first, and then further down we've got the commentary, law reform commission reports, and then if there was legislation, it would be down there as well. So it's just a balancing act of, do you want to narrow further by only focusing on a particular court, or do you want to add further terms up to this search box here by narrowing that way? If you were looking at cases, and I'll go back to the home page now, cases on a particular topic. So as I mentioned before, OSLI doesn't have a lot of the advanced search fields that some of the paid databases do have. It does have an advanced search feature though, and that's on the little drop down arrow here, and you can jump into advanced search here. So a good reason for using this is if you want to limit it to particular courts. So what I would recommend, you need to tick the show all box for starters, and that will bring up all of the databases here. So deselect all. And then as you scroll down, we'll just use Commonwealth as an example. You get down to the cases here, and so you can see if you only want copyright tribunals, you only want Family Court of Australia full court, for example, or if you want both of these, you can click both of them. So that's how to narrow more effectively in OSLI. But for this particular search, I'm just going to leave it on all case law. And I'm going to run a search for risk of harm. And this is going to return a lot of results because it's a very common phrase. So 26,000, but they are all case law. So what I will add up the top here, and this is not, I have to mention that it's not a 100% accurate sort of method, but it's something that our library team have come up with as a workaround because Austlii doesn't have, for example, it doesn't have a catchwords field. So if you could run a catchword search for risk of harm, that would be a fantastic way of refining these results and getting just the really relevant hits. So what we've sort of discovered is if you add in the term near, and near in Austlii is the equivalent of within 50 words of, and then you type in the word catchwords. So the search that we've got here is essentially looking for the phrase risk of harm within 50 words of the word catchwords. So we'll run that search and that brings it down. Still a lot of results, but 970, so a massive improvement. So you could then just keep adding words to this search, and this is one that I've prepared earlier. Let me just delete that out. So I've added near parent. So, and with an asterisk on the end, so that's truncating that word. So it'll find parents, parent, parental, etc. So all each within 50 words. So we'll run that one. And it brings it down again. If I open up one of these results, so you can see here that it's picked up the catchwords, it's picked up parenting, and it's picked up risk of harm. They're all within 50 words of each other. So it's a really effective way of narrowing down your results in Austlii. However, the problem is that not all courts print the word catchwords on their judgment. I'm not sure what the cutoff was, but from running this search and looking at the results, the family court used to never use the word catchwords until I can't remember exactly what year, but I do get some results in the family court, but it's sort of stopped. So just keep that in mind. And I can't remember exactly which courts do and don't use it, but it can often work really effectively, and it's a good little trick to keep in mind if you do need to narrow your results down. This this near feature works for a number of different things as well. I think if I broaden this, actually what I might do, I'm just going to look for family court judgment. So interesting. So this one, you can see the word catchwords doesn't actually appear there, yet it has picked it up, and I'm not sure how that works. But you always get anomalies in this, and when I control F for catchwords, it's not there at all. So like I said, it's not an exact science, but it's a little workaround that has been quite useful to the research that we do. Another thing you could do is, you could look at how they structure their catchwords. They almost always start with family law. That, you could try family law near risk of harm, but given that the Family Law Act calls the Family Law Act, that might not be that helpful either. So it just depends on what the other terms are that you think might be up there in the catchwords field. So another way that you can use that near operator, and I'll jump back to the homepage now, and I'll just run this one from the front page rather than going into the advanced search. And we're looking at the word persecution, but we want to know which cases have considered the meaning of that word. And so again, up in that sort of catchwords area, you've got the words and phrases field that a lot of judgments will, have that title, words and phrases, and then it'll have the different words listed below. So if we use persecution, the word we're interested in, near, words and phrases, and I'm putting that in double quotes because it's a phrase that I'm interested in. We'll run this search and see, and it's brought up 85 results. We have a look at this first one, and you can see there words and phrases, persecution. And the second one. So again, really great way of getting some more relevant results there in Oxley. Now, the PowerPoint slides that you would receive, they include a search tips chart with the different connectors that you can use in Oxley, as well as the other databases that we're looking at today. So hopefully that will be helpful. Now, coming back to the Minters page here, we've also got a link here to Jade, which is another excellent database of unreported judgments, similar to Oxley. One of the main differences with Jade, though, is that, and I'll jump into it here, it allows you to set up alerts for cases. So that's something that you can't do in Oxley. Jade, though, is a database that requires you to register if you want to use the free version, because there's the Jade professional version, and that's what I'm in at the moment, but just it pretty much looks exactly the same. But if you jump into it, it will have an option up the top here to register now, and it's another quick and easy process. So once you've set up your registration for Jade, and you wanted to set up alerts, you would come up to the My Jade option up here, and then come into the alerts menu on the left-hand side. I've got none set up at the moment, so we'll create a new alert. There's all sorts of alerts that you can create in Jade. This drop down here gives you an idea. So whole document, that's just searching the full text, or you can search for a particular case if you want to know when it's going to be, when it's considered by subsequent cases. You could narrow by catchwords, or you could monitor particular decisions by a judge. If you were interested in legislation cited or any particular parties, and so on. There's a lot of different categories here that you can search. So I'm going to do an example of a really broad one here. I'll just keep it on the whole document, and I'm going to search for the phrase intervention with parental agreement. You can narrow by court if you want. If you just wanted to do family court, but I'll just leave it on all. Another way that you can search, you don't have to put text up here, you can just run a search on a particular topic. And I should mention, you can also just monitor a particular court if you want to be notified of all the cases that are coming through. So these topics are Jade generated topics that they file them under. And then you tell it how often you want to be alerted. So it can be an instant alert, or if you want it to, all of your alerts to be sort of bunched together as a weekly thing or whatever. And then you just save that. And yeah, it will send you an email once something new pops up. So on the Jade homepage, if you wanted to search for cases or legislation, it's just a matter of searching up the top here. Once you start typing, it brings in suggestions. That's the Family Law Act there. Otherwise, again, the advanced search is under the little drop-down arrow. And you've got a whole lot of fields here. I just point out that the catchwords field in Jade is a bit funny. I've had times, it's really short. I've had times where I've been looking for catchwords that I know are catchwords in certain decisions, but it doesn't list them here. So just keep that in mind. It can be a little bit problematic. So staying on the alerts theme, another type of alert that you can set up, and I don't believe we have it listed on our website, but it's just under Google, and it's actually, I should put the alerts, flash alerts at the end here. It's Google Alerts. So I'm logged in at the moment. You'll need to either set up a login with email or log in under your Gmail address if you've got one already. And what you can do is set up either a general web alert, or you can monitor press or other particular areas. So I'll have a look at the issue that's been in the news a bit lately around children in watch houses in Queensland. So I'm going to structure my search like that. In Google, you don't have to worry about connectors like and, it just automatically does it. But I have put watch houses in double quotes. It will automatically pick up watch house as well, and children, it will automatically pick up child and Queensland, so on. Under show options, this is where you can tell it how often you want to be alerted. And under sources, this is if you only want news, or if you want the whole web, or say you only want videos. I'll just leave it on news. And you can narrow by region. It defaults to only the best results. I recommend all results. And then you've got an email address in there for it to deliver to. Once you create your alert, it will send that to you when results come up, and to delete it, you can either delete it there, or I believe there's also an option in your alert once it comes through, you can get rid of it there. So while we're on Google, I'm just going to move into some commentary searches. All right, so Google is obviously going to be a great sort of starting point for commentary. And I'll point out also that you've got Google Scholar as well. So that has a focus on scholarly articles. Many will be behind a paywall though. And that's also the case with the press alerts that you know, if you do set up a press alert in Google, many of the articles will be behind a paywall. It's worth mentioning that there are options for accessing press. The Supreme Court Library in Queensland, anyway, all QLS members are entitled to up to 10 free documents a day from the Supreme Court Library. And also for private research or study, state libraries in each state and territory, they're really great sources of press and articles. I know for Queensland State Library, you can set up a login and access a whole range of information from your desktop. You don't actually have to physically come into the library, but yes, I just have to mention that that is for private research or study, but you might find some useful things there. Coming back to regular Google. So let's say we want to have a look at the obligations around responsible lending. One way of narrowing a search like this, I mean, you're probably going to get pretty decent results if you just search for responsible lending. But if I start typing in, oops, I can get rid of that. Yeah. Responsible lending as a phrase, you don't have to really put it in a phrase in Google. I just like to control the search like that. And actually, no, I'll put in obligations. So you're getting a whole lot of results here, predominantly some .gov.au sites, some .org ones as well, and then we come down to the .com. If you only want government websites on this, you can add in what I call site search. So add in the word site, colon, and then the options here are ones that I've run before. So either site.gov.au, or if you want to narrow it down to a smaller jurisdiction, you could do .qld.gov.au and so on. I'll just run it for federal though. And you're only going to get the results from the .gov.au domain. Another database that can be handy for and I'm just going to copy and paste this search, for commentary, particularly recent legal commentary. It's called Fee Fi Fo Firm, and it's specifically a law firm search engine. It also includes results from legal centres like Legal Aid and so on. So if we pop that same search in here, it's powered by Google, so it uses the same rules around searching. It does have this anytime, excuse me, option here where you can change it to really recent stuff. I find it doesn't actually work. So if you just ignore that, click on find, and all of the results that you get here will be coming from Australian, because we're in the Australian version here, Australian law firms or legal focused sites. You can also use Austlii. I'll just jump into it in a shortcut way. Austlii has a journals and scholarships library here. So it's got a number of Australian law journals. A lot of the university law journals are on here, and you can run your search up the top there. The last thing that I wanted to have a look at was a couple of options for historical online material. So back on the Minter's Legal Resources page and under online guides, I think it's here somewhere, here it is, the Wayback Machine. So this is something that's been put together through the Internet Archive. And what it does is it takes a web page back in time. I find it really useful, particularly for old government reports or policies that have been superseded and are no longer available via Googling or no longer on the current government website. So what you do, you pop in the URL in this box here, click on Browse History. So I'm going to look at the Home Affairs Department. Oops, that didn't work. Let me just try that again. The Home Affairs Department website. And once it loads, it brings up this timeline. So you can see the black bars indicate when the website has been crawled and a snapshot has been taken of the website. So it goes back to 2017. Just looking at this year, it's got all these green and blue spots. The blue spots are what you're after. The green spots lead to redirects. So the blue spot, you'll see the blue snapshots then are when you can view it as it was on that particular date. I want to jump back to this oldest one though. So you can see they started crawling it in December 2017, and I'll jump into one of these. So this brings up the website, how it looked on that date back then. And so it must have been the date that the big mega department was formed, and that's why, you know, there's no further history of that URL. So let's say we're interested in multicultural affairs. We'll come down here, just click through to that, and it very cleverly knows that multicultural affairs was filed under the Department of Social Services back then. So then it takes us to that website as it was at the date closest, so December 18, 2017. As I mentioned before, normally I use this to look for, you know, documents, publications, that sort of thing. So it's just a matter of browsing here and finding where that might be. It's different on every website, and it's also important to mention, like with these search boxes that pop up on the databases, you cannot search on one of these archived versions. You have to browse. So it can be really fiddly and time consuming finding a document, but it's just, it takes a lot of clicks. So I'm going to jump under the Settlement and Multicultural Affairs area. And here we go. So you've got programs and policy publications. So this is where you start drilling down, and hopefully you'd be able to find the document that you are after. And you can see this massive list here of documents. I've tried opening a few of these. Some of them work, some of them don't. Let's see if this one opens. And this is where I've run into problems. So the Wayback Machine can be a little bit glitchy. You do sometimes come up against error messages, but this one, oh, that's great. This one works. But if there was a document in that list, or let's say you just wanted to search for something, it was just taking too long browsing, there's another website that it's a similar thing to this, but it's slightly different, and it's the National Library's Trove database. And it's the main way that it's different to the Wayback is that it, rather than it focusing on browsing, it's a real search engine in itself. So once you're in Trove, the general Trove page, under advanced search, there's the option to just search websites, and these are archived websites, Australian, predominantly government, but other Australian ones as well. So you can limit by domain. So I'm going to pop in, that was .pss.gov.au. And one of those documents there was called this, Life in a New Land, the Experience of Migrants, blah, blah, blah. So I've popped that into the phrase field there. And you can limit the date if you just want how it was, or if you know it was there in 2018, but probably not after, you can narrow that date down as well. I'm just going to leave it as is, and it will run this search. And it's not bringing me any results, which is a bit strange. What's happening there? Here we go. Okay, so it's brought 93 results. Once you click into those results, you can see they're all at different dates. But if we go into the top one, this shows you what date you're looking at. You can shift that around to move it out of the way. And then you've got your PDF there, and you can open it that way. So it's just another way of accessing historical websites. If you need to search rather than browse. So that's the end of what I was going to cover. Penny, I might just go back to you and to see if there are any questions in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Susie. I have to say I'm sitting here a bit mind blown at the moment because being able to go back to websites like that historically is incredible. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. So we do have a couple of questions that have come through, both from Peter. The first one is, how current is AustLII? My interest is migration law, and I understand there is a lag. How long, and how do we know it's the latest?
With AustLII, it really depends on the court. If we jump into, they used to have, let me have a look. Once you jump into a court database, it will have the most recent up here, and you can see this decision here is from the 23rd, and it's got its last updated message on the side there. It varies massively depending on the court though. Some of them are great at getting them through within a few hours, others will be a few days.
Great. Okay, thanks, Susie. Peter's second question is about any advice you might have in relation to the AAT database.
I'm in that one now. I guess what I would say, if you were interested in a, excuse me, searching a particular database, drill down to that database first, and you can run your search up here, or come back to the advanced search and then do what we did before, where we show all, and then I'm just going to Administrative Appeals Tribunal. So tick that box. So you're just running your advanced search across the Admin Appeals Tribunal, and then you've got your option to search up the top here. And I mean, I think in OSLI, the same rules apply across all the databases. I'm not particularly familiar with the AAT, and you know, certainly not how quickly they send their material across or anything. But if there was any particular questions you were interested in, let me know. But they all pretty much work the same in OSLI. But probably the best advice, yeah, would be to drill down to the database and then just keep in mind those advanced search techniques that you can run in here, narrowing your search terms down. Yeah, that sort of thing. The other thing you can do, document title on this advanced page is another. That's just going to put your search terms within the document title. So that's either the party name or the title of a journal or the title of legislation. It can be another way of narrowing down your results.
Excellent, thanks, Susie. I think Peter's indicated that's been really useful. Thank you. We have a question here from Murray. Are the Boolean connections standard across all databases now?
Not at all, sadly. And they vary a lot. And so on the last page of the slides that you'll receive, that's got the comparison. I've just put in OSLI, Jade, and Google, because they're the main ones that I looked at today. I didn't put in Lawlex because it's not really a database that you run advanced searches on. You're just really looking for an act. But they all, unfortunately, they vary massively. I mean, and or a not is fairly standard across most of them. But even, you know, Lexis and Westlaw, they vary a lot, and I'm sure they do it intentionally as well. But you'll definitely see in the search tips sheet that I've included, there is some crossover, but unfortunately, no, still not the same.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Susie. I think it's really useful to know. In the room here, we were wondering whether, obviously there's, you know, court bulletins like High Court, Supreme Court, etc. We're wondering about if you know about sort of lower court and tribunal bulletins that come out that people can subscribe to.
No, I don't. I could look into that though and get back to you if you like.
Well, that would be great. Thank you. Really helpful, because I think a lot of our sector, a lot of our people would be looking for information like that around the lower court. So that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Okay. All right. Well, that looks like it's brought us to the end of the questions that people had, and I think part of the reason is that your presentation was just so comprehensive and practical and incredibly useful. And often the questions that we were thinking of got answered then. as you were going along. So that was excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's just been an incredibly rich and powerful source of information and access to great resources for our sector. So thank you so much, Susie. We really appreciate it. And so thank you to everyone who's joined the session today. That brings us to the end. Before you go, just a reminder to complete this feedback survey that will pop up on your screen once the webinar is closed. And obviously your feedback is really important to help us continually improve our webinar program. So huge numbers of thank yous coming through to you, Susie. People have learnt so much, and we're deeply grateful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Great. Excellent. Well, great to have you on board as part of our program for the year. So, all right, well, that brings us to the end of the webinar. So we're going to say goodbye for now, and we'll look forward to catching you again next time.